strategies or how the farm strategy, trade strategy can help them actually to gain in the international market. We recently did a paper and when I was reading up the module, I thought this could be one example which can fit into a farm successful trade strategy. It's actually a farm. For us, it would be farms for a sector, certain sector. So we did this paper on war. That is something still happening. What's the context? There are many papers right now. There's 2 papers which talks about that war or conflicts have been perceived as trade is inversely related to war and conflicts. If there is war or conflict, trade will go down. And there are these 2 papers by the same authors, Korofkin and Makarin. They use the Crimea War to show that trade in Ukraine, within Ukraine, not between trade between Ukraine and Russia. It's within Ukraine trade, there are areas where you had more ethnic Russians, the trade with those areas went down. So if an area had more Russian people of the other areas, Ukrainian, ethnic Ukrainians, did not do trade with those areas. There is a negative effect when the war on trade because of the ethnicity of that. The trust on the Russians went down. Even people who are living with you for long, the trust on them went down significantly. So that's why they argue that the social capital, the trust went down because of the Crimea invasion by Russia on Ukraine, and that's why the trade went down. And when the trade also goes down because of sanctions. When war happens, a lot of sanctions come on the countries. I'm sure you have seen the recent news for the last 2 years. There are a lot of sanctions comes in, and that impacts trade. But there are papers which shows that sanctions also has actually limited effects. I was discussing just before that countries or farms reroute their trade because of sanctions. They do from the other routes possible, and these papers show that basically when there are sanctions in Myanmar against sanctions in Cuba, the trade with the US between Myanmar and Cuba did not decline the same way you expect to happen with sanctions. So sanctions also has heterogeneous effects. This is a theory paper, came out a little way back. It shows that, theoretically, this is a theory paper, it shows that trade and wars may not be negatively correlated. Because imagine we are in a war, we're not in a bilateral war, we are in a multilateral war. We depend on a lot of partner countries to do trade. So once something, let's say someone is in a war with someone, then I can divert my resources or trade exports or imports, whatever, to other countries. If I am being given in fact, sanction not to trade with that country, even if I'm not directly involved, I can divert my trade. So given that, it's not very clear that war and trade might be negatively related. That standard wisdom that conflicts would lead to drop in trade might not necessarily be true. Now, this gives us the question, interesting idea or thought that in a world with multilateral trade, how do firms which are not a party to the war, there's nothing to do with the war, there's someone else is working, I'm a third country, how does they react? Do they stop trade completely? Because now, theoretically, the reasons are not clear. Do they stop trade? Because if I trade, let's say, if I trade, for example, with a country which is at war, I maybe unjustifiably, for example, let's say, which is the case here, I might be put into sanctions. I might be blacklisted to other countries. So I might have a negative effect. My goodwill might be lost. And there are a lot of sanctioned products. If I'm doing sanctions trade, then my goodwill, I might be blacklisted, some other country might blacklist me to export to them. So there is a negative effect if I am doing trade. So do they stop trade because of the loss of goodwill, or do they trade more? Because theoretically, if you think, when there is a war, there's an excess demand. If there are sanctions, there's an excess demand. If someone else is not supplying to you, you need that good, and there's an excess demand situation. So theoretically, if you think about this, there are two kinds of effects. Positive, because when you want to trade, there's an excess demand, you can profit from there. Yeah, every one is a profit, every firm is a profit maximizing entity. So you can profit from there. But on the other hand, if you trade, there's a negative effect because of blacklisting, because of goodwill loss, because of all other kind of political effects that come in when you're trading with someone who has been sanctioned. What do? Theoretically, it's not clear. It could be go either way, right? Or do they, I don't know, redirect trades to somewhere? Because if I'm doing the trade with them, how do I stop that trade? What do I do if I'm a third party? I have nothing to do with it. And this Russia-Ukraine war gave us a nice scenario because Russia-Ukraine war happened. It started with the Crimea War, which is not a formal war, but 2022 Russia-Ukraine war was a formal war because Russia entered Ukraine soil, full-scale war. It could be many reasons. I don't care about the reasons because there are many reports about the reasons why the Russia-Ukraine full-scale war started. It could be follow-up of the Crimea War. It could be NATO's activities in the region. It could be President Putin's ambitions. It could be anything. You just don't know. So the war happened as it is. This is what it is. And because of the war, it led to widespread global economic and political instability. That happened. And there was an extensive amount of sanctions was imposed on Russia by the US and the EU. As of 2024, US has imposed about 6,000 sanctions, and UK has imposed about 5,000 sanctions. Canada has used about 4,500 sanctions, and EU about 1,200 sanctions. So and it has increased now. I'm talking about last October data. This has increased. So significantly, this has increased. But this gives us a unique setting in a world where multilateral openness matters in an uncertain environment like a war or a third country. And what is the third country? It's India in this case. India decided to remain strategically neutral here and continues to maintain ties with both Russia and US and EU, while supplying also humanitarian aid to Kyiv and a posture of strategic ambivalence. So India was not supportive of the war. They say clearly in the UN that they would maintain for its peaceful solution with a backing the specific country. This is forwarding from the UN representative. And India has this is not new for India. India has long maintained a non-aligned foreign policy. If you go back to the Cold War, India, along with Ghana, along with Indonesia, Egypt, India was one of the founding members of the non-aligned movement. That we do not go with either of the parties, with Russia or with US. So this is not new for India. It is maintained for long, from 1960 onwards, to be neutral in kind of a big political scenario in the world. So this gives us a nice setting. When you are neutral, something happening out there, what happens to those farms? And the other story that came out in Guardian in 2023, that Guardian went to the leather companies in India. They saw that some of the leather companies in India were supplying, were exporting in Russia. So they interviewed some of the few. And this quote, I quote from Guardian, that Russia was a regular market like any other market like China or Europe, but certainly after the war, there is boosting demand. It was said by one of the biggest exporter of Indian leather export, Fumerakani, by Thai. This led us think that if someone is neutral and the war is happening and there is capacity constraint, what happens? Because you want to supply, you cannot supply, right? You have to increase your production. There's capacity constraint assumption. How do you increase your production overnight? Is it impossible to increase your production? Why later? I don't have to repeat to this audience. This is one of the prominent places in India. Still, we saw that the importance of leather went down, but if you look at that was saying, if you look at absolutely, it's still the largest exporter, fourth largest exporter of leather goods in the world. And what we do was, Sorry, no. So the data set we use, this I cannot share with you guys. So I'll give you a macro data set on this. So it comes from a global supply chain analytics company. So we have monthly level customs data across from Indian exporters, leather exporters, from across the world to every country at the HS 8-digit code. So we know exactly what is being supplied to which country by month. This is from January 2021 until October 2020. There is about 12 months before the war, and this is 14 months after the war. This is the universe of leather exporting firms. So all the leather exporting firms, this we have. So we have both the values and the quantities. We aggregated data at the 6-digit level. It is basically a data. We know all the destinations. We also know the mode of transport, where it is shipped, by air or by land. Yes.
So can you please name the data?
It's called trade. And we match this with CMI crowds for some other. I will not show you the result. It can be matched, but not that great. The match is 25% above because CMI prowess has only the listed firms. A lot of exporting firms are not listed, so you cannot match. And we also use this word for the macro scenario. But this is a very nice but extremely costly data set. Extremely costly. We had to pay about 10,000 or more pounds to get this data set. So it's a hugely costly 10,000 pounds. It's about to get this data set. So it's about 10 in Indian rupees. It'd be more than 10 to 12 lakhs for just for this few months. So summary, you can see this is pretty much value of exports to Russia versus rest of the world. This pretty much summarizes the result, whatever you have. This is Russia of exports, leather exports to Russia, divided the leather to the rest of the world for the leather exporter. Before the war, January to December, there was hardly any difference in the ratio. Indian exporters were supplied pretty much the same to Russia and to the rest of the world. War started, January, February war started, the preparations of the war started, it started increasing. During the war, you can see the ratio was about 1.2 or something, it went up to double. So significant increase of Indian exporters started supplying to Russia versus the rest of the world. Significant increase. So this is, and so you can see, just to give you some ideas, the total value of exported, this is to Russia, actually tripled. Average shipment value also tripled. The share of exports to Russia went up from 1.1% to 2.6%. Whereas for the world, it dropped. For the other world, overall exports increased, but the average shipment value dropped significantly. And the other stylized facts I want to show you is because we know the mode of shipment. By year, you can see before the war and after the war shipments, it's about 60% increase. Yeah, it was obviously increased, but there's a natural trend that increased. But this is huge increase. For the rest of the world, the increase wasn't that much. It's huge increase, but that gives you the war could have played a role in terms because you need now shipments very, very quickly. So that's why you are air shipping stuff. Again, very simple DIV. Very simple DIV. Exports, Russia-Ukraine war versus an exporter who is exporting to Russia. That's it. And there are multiple amount of fixed effects. I'm not going to discuss this. What I wanted to show you two things. Actually three. First, what you have to check first when you're thinking about this, it could be possible that the exporters to Russia and exporters to the rest of the world are very different. They are already exporting to Russia more and they are exporting more. What we did to counter that was checking before the war whether there is a significant difference with someone exporting to Russia versus the rest of the world. You can see there is no difference in the value, not the quantity, not the price. Nothing. So what Tahir Rezwan said, that Russia was like a regular market, like any other market, it is true what we find in the data, that it was no different from any other market. This is before the war. And once the war, I'm not showing you this, once the war hits, you can see the significant increase happens, and a significant increase happens through transport. Maritime takes one, so it's negative, that means air shipments went down. So to give you an idea, a leather exporter was earning before the war $81,000 for a shipment. Now it started earning $160, $60,000. So it's exactly double after the shipment. This is in absolute terms. This is $81,000. This is $160 after the war. So it's exactly the double. Leather and textile exporters started earning double after the war. How they did it? They started earning, obviously, but how they did it? So quantity, price, products a bit, but quantity, price, everything went up significantly. But how they did it? Is it they start producing more or what? That's overnight. How can you start producing that double? It's impossible. Capacity constraints. You cannot produce that much overnight. How do you produce that much? So what we did, our data set was interesting enough to show what the mechanism was, is we show that did you actually redirect exports or not? Because you can take from one to other. This is a trade strategy, right? It's a very interesting trade strategy. Well, that's what India did. They took it from Africa, Caribbean, Southeast Asia, and Asia, is not disturbing Europe and North America. This is a fantastic trade strategy. So these two impose sanctions. So I'm not disturbing trade with them. Because if you are disturb trade with them, you come up with more sanctions. So I'm not disturbing trade with them. What I'm doing is I am taking stuff from smaller trade partners and selling it for a higher price because I'm a profit maximizing entity. I'm taking it from here and just selling it with a higher price. It's a great data set, absolutely, to understand all this. But this is a fantastic trade strategy and a successful strategy. And what I don't. So I don't have the table here. I don't know why didn't I put. So what India did was the other question, the other thing we show here is that because when the sanctions happen, so there are sanctioned products. The negative effect comes mainly if you are trading in or exporting in sanctioned products. And what are sanctioned products? Generally, sanctions are imposed on persons, entities, nations, and stuff. But products, when a unit price of the product is above 300 euros, which is about 25,000 rupees. If that is above 25 to 26,000, then you are trading in sanctioned products. We show that is actually India not only diverting goods to other, redirecting, not doing sanction. It's like the low price goods, not the high price one. So I cannot be sanctioned by anyone. I'm not doing sanction trade. I'm doing regular stuff. So I'm doing low stuff from less important trade partners to a partner which needs goods right now because they have been sanctioned. And I'm earning price profits. I'm pretty much sure profits went up significantly because price doubled. Your unit price went double, your quantity went up, your value of exports went up, so your profits must have went up. We cannot see the profits because we don't have data on profits, but since your value of exports have doubled, your profits must have close to double, for sure. This has happened because this is I need to come back and show to you. So this is basically this is Russia's exports. So there is a first order effects of sanctions. You can see this is before the war. This is share of exports to Russia by US and EU to the total exports. So once the war hit, you can see it significantly declined. So there is a gap. So there's an excess demand. India only could supply because there is an excess demand after the war. So the ratio of exports completely dropped after the war started by both the US and the EU. So there's an excess demand situation, and India could grab that situation. The exporters could grab that situation, and can be a successful trade, which is called reshoring. That when you're taking one product from one place and pushing it to other, it's called reshoring. You are taking from one shore and putting it to other shore. It's a very successful. If you can do it, they have done it very nicely and doing unsanctioned products, which you can't say much. You have supplying shards, bullets, pants, and stuff at a little bit higher prices because I'm a profit maximizing entity, and there's a gap. One is supplying to you, I go and supply to you. As simple as that. Good. So this is more or less a successful strategy that I wanted to show you guys. Now you have the data, you have the macro level data. So what you do is do two things. Calculate the share of that. So calculate the share of the exports or the imports. You have both actually. By destination. I guess it is divided into Russia, EU, China, and US. Something like this. If you have more, and plot this. Do you know how to plot this graphs? It's called event study. Do you know how to plot this graph? You should learn this one. It's very essential. You just create dummies, simple time dummies, and regress the share of exports on time dummies. In this case, just the time dummies. Except time dummies. You have how many years? You have, I guess, 2018. So you have to drop 1 year because otherwise there would be dummy variable trap. So you have to use 2019, 2023 for 5 dummies. 5 dummies, and you share of exports, regress the share of exports on this. On time dummies. You can control for the product fixed effects. If you want controlling for, you have the product ID code. If you can, controlling for the product fixed effects or code. Let me see what I have given it to you. One is at the HS codes, one is at the 3D, but doesn't matter. Whichever one you want. Pick up any of the one, whichever you're comfortable. You have world imports as well. And this is by China, India actually. So the imports, it's by India. So you can use share, you know how to calculate share. I don't have to say to PhD students how to calculate share. And this is India's exports as well. Both are India. This is the export by India. Yes. So yeah, either of the one you pick up, I've given two, whichever you're comfortable with. The exports, I guess, is given in HS codes. broad HS codes so that you don't need take time much to do this. And the imports are given in 3-digit. Write a do file. Let me check how my do file. So, you can make groups and do it. This is, you will be showing it to me. Treatment year 2022. I guess so. Oh, which are the years? Yes, 2022. 2022. So plot something like this. This is India's imports. This is, you can search up. Now you have so many uh, things. And this plot is called coefficient plot. So you can search up directly after calculating the shears, coefficient plot, stata command. So you have the command. This is called a coefficient plot. Or you can plot directly. This, if you have the First, calculate the shears. Huh? Uh-huh. Because you cannot come this for all the best. Yeah, not taking constant. I'm not taking constant. Then you have started to do it. Yes, yes. Take either of the one. Take the share of India's exports to US out of the total, and then see over the time, or you can compare two countries. Plot two ones. Take US or let's say China. Developed in the Middle East.
We have taken the share of US over the US and
You have taken share of total exports, right?
Yes, sir.
Total exports. One US, and you can do one China or any other country. That does not do EU. That developed and developing something like this, and see the plots, what is happening, or EU and Russia. Yes, you can use the product code as the fixed effects, because you cannot use industry or product. Sorry, year. Sorry, you cannot use year. You can use for you regress and then plot. You can't plot, but still regress and at least regress. The time dummies, the share of exposed and time dummies. The plot I will show you. If you can't, I'll get the share and regress. That's what we would like to find. Yes. That's you what we will find. No significant before. There will be no significant before. Now, you try and plot the solutions. You go to I'll show you. But the result will be exactly what that is. And this is share of exposed plus share. What is the name of that? Plot called coefficient plot. Try and see if you can find the command. We got the results. And it's because for share of Russia, or the US, so you are, is it negative or? You can compare Russia, Piyush, you can compare Russia with someone else. Other regression,
Not significant.
or
That I was seeing it is not.
so you can compare China, Russia with US or EU. Do it for one node and see what is the effect on 2023, either for the US or the EU. And the same thing,
US is negative.
negative. So I can do Russia, US or Russia, EU or China, US or China, EU, two countries. Just do opposite, not do US, EU. Then it's not interesting. Because I showed it to Russia, compare Russia with someone else. Either US and EU. Managed to do it. Very simple, just calculate the shares. You could calculate the shares. The shares you just have to calculate, generate, let's say, share,
However, calculate.
Mathematically, you just have to calculate time. Just write 10, and do the same for the others. And then you regress. Hmm? But it's not significant. The US would not be significant. No, not be significant. So you can compare US and Russia. You can do it for, so I did for Russia, you can do it for US. Create the dummies. You know how to create time dummies, right? Very simple. The most interesting thing is how to create confidence. These are the confidence. They do it lot with the confidence. Automatically, you don't have. You don't have. But this is share of the US in the, so you can compare the share of the US with the share of Russia. You can do the same. What happens with Russia? US is, yes. So you can compare with Russia and see what happens. Yes. Uh-huh. Not like this. Actually, regress first. So not like so. Yes. So you have calculated, right? Yes, export share. So you have to create a dump. You have to create here dumps. So let's say 0, 1, 1. Like this, you create it for the years and then have the Russian export share based on this. And same similar for the years.
So you took the year.
The share.
It would be divided with world
Exactly. That will be fine because it is seeing always the share with respect to the total. Did you manage to run the regressions? Good. And see, is Russia now positive? More or less, right? For everyone. And I'll show you once you are ready with the regression results. Not beautiful? That's fine. We'll make it beautiful. Ready? Yeah, more or less, yeah, seems to be okay. Good. This is it. See, it's an increase, significant jump.
Here it is not.
No, it's not different from zero. That's why you are plotting coefficients. That's why you want to show why. Ready, more or less? With the regression results? Could do the regression results, right? More or less. So why, after the regressions, why we not nowadays we don't want to plot? Let's say we could have plotted this shear in a histogram or a line graph, right? And show what is the trend. But the point here is why we now do not plot much of line graphs or histograms rather than plotting coefficients. The main reason why we want to plot is we want to like to know whether there has been significant differences in the trend before the event has happened or not. The average values doesn't give us that. That's why the coefficient plots from the regressions. That's why. So what I'm doing is I am just plotting share of exports of India to Russia on few time dummies, and I will do a coefficient plots. So that's the. So you can use the command coef plot. That's the command. And then you want to keep whatever dummies you want to keep, or the regression or the coefficients that you want to keep. That's C. I can want to keep all the dummies. Then I have named them. Title, what would be the size, what is the X title, where do I line, what do I need the line, like the treatment line, with I need the Y title, I put some notes, all this graph region and stuff. These are not necessary. So if I run this regression, so it gives me nicely these plots. So you can see before, what do I care? This care about this one and this one, because this is not significant from 0. That's what I care for. That before the war started, Indian share of exports to Russia wasn't different from other countries. And once the war started, it started. That's what I wanted to show. Because if it was going before, was different from 0 and then different from 0, then that is not interesting. Interesting is when it starts, as the event happens, then it starts become significant. Then it starts to move from differentially from 0. And if I do, the next thing I do is I want to check ratio of exports to Russia by India to exports to US by India, whether this is moving when I'm creating a ratio that, let me use this, then you'll understand what I'm doing it here is share exports to Russia by exports to US. So what I like to see is whether exports to Russia is going at the expense of the US or not. And you can substitute this by U as well, however you want, whether that is happening or not. So what I'm trying to see is here, the exports to Russia is happening at the expense of other countries or not. Is this increasing as the ratio of US and EU, or this is pretty much the same? I'm diverting my resources, exports from here to here, or nothing happens? How this is going up and down? Exports of Russia net of with a ratio to the US. Yes, net of US. So if I do this, if this ratio goes up, then two things can happen, right? Either this goes up or this goes down. So I am doing this at the expense of this. This is what we don't find. But I'm not doing this at the expense of exports to US. See, my coefficients are not significantly different from 0. It's pretty much touching the 0. If you see the regression results, the coefficients is also not significant. It's a little significant here at 10%. In fact, it's negative. It's the opposite actually. And it's negative. This ratio is negative. Even if it's not, it is negative for 1 year. That means either this is going up or this is going down. Negative news. But that's just for 1 year, pretty much 10% level. It's not significant. Is it going different? Different for the euro? Yes, we find a bit here. This is except letters. So for EU, we find that there has been some diversion for other goods to Russia at the expense of EU. So this means increases means either exposed to EU or US is EU is going down, or exposed to Russia, among those categories is going up. Because this has been significant. But before, the point being, before the war, you can see there's nothing significantly different from zero. We could plot this simply time. You have seen this. You have simply, before you plot this histograms, line graph, but it doesn't give you whether this is actually different from zero or not, the shares. This gives you nicely that this even has a mean. The line graphs or the histograms wouldn't say that. You can see if you plot the share would go up, but they wouldn't say the shares were not different. This one, that's why we kind of cared now that this one gives.
The confidence interval doesn't touch zero.
Yes.
So
That means basically it's significantly different from zero. If I go to the regression results, you can see it will not touch. If it's significantly different from zero, if it's close to 10%, then we'll slightly touch. But if it's 5% and above, 5 of 1%, it will never touch. So then we know it's strongly significant from different from zero. And you can see before the war, there was no effect. It's from zero. Right? I can send you, if you want, I can send you the coef plot, the coef plot command in a do file. We can use that as well. There are many commands actually. There are many commands of do file in terms of the coef plot. If type coef plot, there are many commands will come down. People use differently. I have used, this is vertically, people use horizontally. There are many ways to use it. Horizontally, yeah. There are many ways to use it. There is not one way to use it. It's just that he has used horizontally. There are many ways to use it. So then that's not a problem at all.
This is
You can able to compare like it comes directly to the eyes. Something like so I've used vertically. And something to different with China, let's see. Then we'll finish. Is it different with China? Yes. So it is also different to China. Little bit. It still touches, it should be 10%. I'm pretty much sure. So if I use with respect to China, I can see the coefficients. Then see this 10% after the war. So there is a bit of here to China means if I replace this with China, it increases with either exports towards China goes down and this is exports towards Russia. So what? This is except leather. I've not put leather here. So you don't have leather actually. Why? Why haven't put leather? To show that when you are, people will ask you that if you're showing that leather exports is diverting to Russia, what happened to other set of exports? Showing that whether Russia is evolving as one of the important trade partner of India across every product category is not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily the case. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but not necessarily for every product category it is going up. No. So this is what it is. How do you do trade and kind of trade analysis at the macro level? I'll send you the coefficient plots, don't worry. The command for the coefficient plot. So what is the time? Let's we 2000. Oh, so you can drop for 2018. I don't want to drop. You just drop the good. What will happen is you're taking it down there. You can have all the time. One has to be done. The not for the name and have to But we need the year after the war. That's important. So let's take a break for lunch. I have again taken part of your lunch break.
So this is static event or just event.
Just event. Just event study.
Dynamic event is when you have multiple event.
So that's called staggered DID. The staggered, you're talking about staggered DID, where the treatment happens over multiple times.
And then we compare the event specific event, right?
Yes. So we normalize the event to some zero, because if the event happens for different individual at different point in time, we normalize the event, because then otherwise you cannot compare. Then you have to normalize the event for everyone. Come to zero and then count.
And then what is the significance of this minus in that? So event happened in 2020, so it will be 0. Then next will 1, 2, 3.
On to what the minus is basically to show if there are pre-trends or not. If it is significantly different before the event, that's the point. Right? So after lunch, it's to lunch.